What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm ohSchnapp, and today we're going to be talking about a few 3D printing tips and tricks to get that specially customized piece you've always wanted. Whether you're modifying an existing piece or combining two individual ones, we're going to be looking at how to make it structurally strong for the real world depending on your use for it, as well as a few modeling tips so that you can make sure it comes out how you intend. Stay tuned to find out how. Alright guys, let's get into it. So, you're trying to create the perfect piece for that very specific situation. And you've looked online for pre-made models, designs people have already created, and while they might get you 80 or 90% there, you really haven't found something that gets you the ideal scenario. So how do you do that? How do you get something like, whether combining two existing models or modifying a single individual design, how do you get it to fit your exact needs, and how do you get to come out structurally strong and make sure you print it the right way that you want to? Well, I've been racing quads a lot more often lately, and I used to have the solution for applying the FPV camera on my quad was just basically to douse it in hot glue, hold it in place, and hope for the best. And with as much race practice I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, this was great, but after about every third gate that I hit, the camera would just snap off. And after re-hot gluing the camera for about 3 times in 1 week, I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I created this very nifty TPU 3D print. You can see on the quad right there. Let it focus. It holds my ohSchnapp 1000 TVL camera. The camera's only about $10. Highly recommend it. It's 5 volt. And what's nice about it too is the mount goes around the standoffs, so it doesn't weaken the structure stability of the top plate. So you're not gonna have the problem with the top plate flexing down or anything like that. And since I've used this, I've done a couple of races and tons of practice. Haven't even put a scratch on it. Just to give you guys an idea of what it looks like off the quad, here is the mount. You can see the 2 holes for the standoff right there. Oops. Oop. And you can also see the mount for the actual camera. So it's very nice. The camera can just kind of like slide in the back right there. Let's see if I can get it to happen. Ooh. Yeah, something kind of like that. And see, it kind of just sits right in there. And if I did this all by hand, it would take a long time to kind of measure everything, lots of practice prints, and it would just take forever. So what I decided to do was look on Thingiverse and see, try and get some models that already had a good starting point, so I could kind of tweak some existing models and make something that fit for my, specific situation. So let's get on Thingiverse. All right. So after some searching, I found this kind of base shrike cage for that goes around the entire shrike frame, which would be cool in some scenarios, but I really didn't need that much protection. I was really only looking for the exact distance between the 2 standoffs, those front parts. And then I also found this ohSchnapp 1000 TVL camera mount that converted the camera to work for HS1177 style mounts. While this might already be good for most people, I'm really not a fan of these screw holes right here. The screws always fall out on my quads, and just makes for a loose kind of hacky kind of solution. I'd much rather have a fixed camera that I know will never move. So I downloaded both of these models, popped them into Maya, And after some tweaking, I got this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and hide the eSheen mount and talk about this piece right here. Basically, I took the original standoff piece, which was basically where I'm just drawing my mouse right here, and I took the measurement of the standoffs, made it slightly wider than the standoffs so that the TPU goes around them, so it doesn't take the place of the standoffs, so we're still maintaining that structural support. And then I also created this diagonal kind of ramp right here, so that when I did actually integrate it with the eSheen mount, it was kind of a nice blend right there. Now, usually when you're creating 3D printed parts, you want to really make sure that a lot of the edge flow lines up properly, especially when you're combining models. You know, you usually want to be concerned with that you have triangles and quads, that you don't really have T intersections where two edges are going together like that, just because it'll cause bad problems while you're printing, depending on your slicer. However, because I'm using Simplify 3D, which I highly recommend to anybody 3D printing, it has special features in it that can heal these sort of attributes. So even though these are two completely different models, and I've just kind of pressed them together like that, I've also slightly modified the eSheen one to have these little clips here, taken off the, I guess, the screw hole mounts as well. Even though I've kind of pushed these two guys together, I can essentially export this as an OBJ. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just click right there, and because I've already exported it, I won't do it again. Then we can open up Simplify 3D, and let's go ahead and navigate to it. Second. All right, and we'll bring that guy in. Boom. And you can see it comes in as one piece, but Simplify 3D has a great feature here where you can actually just select that one piece, select mesh, and do separate connected surfaces. And now I can select the individual pieces and move them around. Now, why is this beneficial? Well, Simplify 3D also has this other feature. If I go and add a process down here, over in the Advanced tab, it has Heal non-manifold segments, as well as merge all outlines into a single model. And when we check on those two things, basically what it's going to do is when it prints these things, it's going to join them together where it has two outlining outlines. So that's going to be great because it's actually going to combine our two pieces automatically. We don't have to worry about edge flow. We don't have to worry about anything like that. And you can see right here, it did a really good job. Oops. Difficult dealing with the mirroring. Did a really good job of getting kind of that combination in on that slant right there. And, combining the two pieces, there's not really any structural weakness in there. It's very nicely combined. So going back to Simplify 3D, there's a few other things that we can do to this just to improve the printing process. So being that it's two different pieces right now, we can generate individual support resolutions for them. What I mean by that is if we look at the eSheen camera right there, and I go to support generation, and if I hit generate supports, you can see that it did a pretty shitty job, not very symmetrical at all. So I'm going to go ahead and change some support settings on there. Just going to make my resolution 1 millimeter, and now you can see we get a much nicer support structure across the entire piece right there. So that's good for that guy. Now I'm also going to do the same thing for this guy. Generate automatic supports. And you can see we've got nice support going all around there. So the nice thing about kind of separating your pieces is, like, if I wanted on this guy to have a different support resolution, like let's say 2, see we can kind of work that separate support resolution in, and when we actually go to print this stuff, it will kind of put it all together nice and neatly in one piece. And now I don't have to worry about welding this at all. Like if I wanted to change the if I wanted to change the angle of my camera, I could very easily go into Maya and tweak this and then just export right away. I wouldn't have to worry about combining these edges at all, which is great. It's a great feature of Simplify 3D that really helps you out in actual printing. Now, there's two more things that I want to quickly talk about, and that's structural support for the real world. So let's take a very simple shape like a triangle. This is a GoPro Hero mount, or GoPro Session mount for my GoPro. You can see the another one on my quad right here. And you can see the red one is cracked right there. Now, I've printed these GoPro mounts essentially just like this. So, it prints and just goes basically up like that. The problem with that is that if, like, let's say I'm flying, I'm flying this way and my GoPro gets hit like that, it's going to rip, or it's going to either rip the strap right there, or I've actually had times where it's delaminated the GoPro, or sorry, the 3D print and pulled the print off. And the same thing happened with this guy. It actually crushed downward and started to pull it off again and slightly delaminate it. So how can we fix that? Well, we have to print the same object a different way. So printing orientation, that's going to be the biggest thing to focus on here. This mount was printed actually like this. And when you print it like this, instead of like this, when it's actually used this way, because the lines are going vertical, it's not going to break that way. It's not going to delaminate when it rips off, one way or another, because you're actually printing at perpendicular to the weak point of, the stress point of the structure. So, of course, depending on the design of your object, you're going to need to print certain ways. But if you can help it, depending on what the object is used for, you might want to print the actual levels, the different layers, in a different orientation to make your piece more structurally sound. All right, and the last tip that will totally help your prints in the 3D world. It is layer thickness, especially for thin layers. Now, a few friends asked me to print some objects for them, and they were basically like, if I go over to Maya, they're basically like this. So imagine a box right here, and when it goes to print this object, it is going to print the outlines first, so this inner edge, right? And then it's going to print the outer edge, and then it's going to print the space in between those two edges. Now, most printers have a nozzle width of 0.4 millimeters. The reason why this is important is because in Maya or the digital world, scale really doesn't matter. Stuff is only relative to each other in Maya in the digital world. But when you come into the real world, stuff has to be relative to the machine that creates it. Obviously you can't print something bigger than your printing bed, and you can't print something, on the molecular level because your nozzle doesn't have that resolution. So because your nozzle has a fixed resolution of let's say 0.4 millimeters, all of your models should have a wall thickness multiple of 0.4 millimeters. And I just want to explain this a little bit better just in 2D, what I mean by this. So let's say if it's printing the wall like this, it's going down, printing the wall, and then it comes back and begins to print the other side of the wall. And this is great, but let's say after it prints that other side, then it goes to fill in the middle gap. Now, when it does this middle gap fill in, the way I drew this, I drew it with enough room, but let's say that when you're printing along, same example, if I can draw straight, printing along, going like that. And, oh god, it's so hard to draw straight lines. Okay, something like that. There we go. So let's say that this amount is 0.4 millimeters, this amount is 0.4 millimeters, and the space in between is only 0.2 millimeters. So your entire wall thickness is 1 millimeter thick, if I can do math. 1 millimeter thick. So that's going to cause a problem, because when it goes to actually print the inner line, if I can get my right brush here, right, maybe like that. When it goes to print this inner line right here, once it gets, if it doesn't have enough room to print that inner line, it's going to try and do it anyway, and it's going to cause these outer lines to push out. And because the real world is random, every layer that it does this on are either, like, maybe the first layer will start to sway more to the right, the second layer might start to sway more to the left, and as you're going up, when you're kind of building your 3D wall, if this is your wall right here, and it's doing the different layers going up like that, these layers, it's going to look very kind of gloppy, very, very goopy around the side, because it's either going to spill out to the left or it's going to spill out to the right as you're going up. So while this object is fairly complex to worry about layer thickness, when you're dealing with extremely thin walls, especially right angle walls, it's always a good idea to make sure your layer thickness is a multiple of your printing nozzle. And like I said, most nozzles are 0.4 millimeters. So, as long as you do, like, let's say 1.2, 1.6 millimeters, you're totally fine. The wider, the better. It'll also help in support removal. But, you really want to stick to that multiple, because, now you're taking your digital creations and moving them to the real world. And while you don't have those same constraints in Maya, you do have those constraints in real life. So you kind of have to be thinking about that before you actually get it to real life on the printing bed. All right, so I hope these tips and tricks have helped you guys out. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to focus on something a little bit more, if you want me to answer any more questions. And always like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.